in these sessions, we're just trying to start some conversations about careers in the world of work and different ways we can approach that. And I'm really excited because today we're joined by Casey, who is going to be talking about her career. She started out as a secondary teacher. She has worked in some really innovative schools and started some programs of her own. And now she's working with the Parramatta Eels on their exciting education arm as well. Thank you so much, Casey, for joining me.
No worries. Happy to be here.
Look, I just wondered if you'd start us off by going right back to the beginning, taking us back to your time at school. What did you want to be while you were still in high school? And was teaching always the plan for you?
Yeah, I love this question because it's very true that when you look back, you can see all the dots being connected. And I think I always start with the fact that growing up, I always wanted to be a teacher, so much so that I would make my younger brother and younger cousin attend my fake classes growing up. We had a whiteboard outside. I would even make them homework, not that they loved that. So there was always a desire in me ever since I was a little girl to be a teacher. And so naturally, as I was moving through school, I originally wanted to do primary teaching, but then kind of jump shipped and focused more on high school teaching. Didn't really love any of my subjects in high school, had some great teachers, but just knew that I wanted to teach. And so I went to uni, I went for English and PHP, or health and movement science, however you classify it. But even that in and of itself is a pretty bizarre combo, English and health, or English and PE. And so what I found when I was starting to look at where I wanted to teach once I finished school, I didn't know it at the time, but I was just always drawn to non-traditional schools and schools that were challenging the status quo. And my very first school out of uni was actually a trade school. So it was just year 11 and 12 at the time. Students were doing their high school certificate, but then completing the first year of their apprenticeship or traineeships. And so I was teaching English at the time, but I just loved seeing the connection between school and the workforce from the get-go. And, students would go out and do like placements. So it's funny how that piece actually is very pivotal to what I do now. But at the time I was like, I just love seeing this connection between school and the workforce. And I started to become curious about, well, could I learn anything more in this space? And so I started to have a look at different grad cert programs around career development. I ended up picking one through RMIT, studying that online. And the very first concept that I was introduced to in that grad cert was the idea of life design or career design, that we are the designers of our career and life. And I was hook, line, and sinker, loved it, and was like, cool, how do I redesign my role at this existing school? But little did I know that a school about half an hour from me actually was very innovative, St. Luke's Catholic College in Marsden Park. And I had someone send me through a job role, like out of the blue. I hadn't even spoken with this person in years, being like, hey, I know this is really random, but I've just seen this job and I thought of you. And it was teacher of life design, which just baffled me. Like, the concept that I loved was actually a teaching role, that sat alongside English at that school, maths at that school, PE, and very innovative. And the preface of that course was across year 7 through to year 10, students would do a subject where they were the subject. They learnt about their strengths, interests, motivators, did passion projects, entrepreneurial projects, dug deeper into uncovering their purpose, and then use that to design their learning and their career. So very inside out approach. Loved it. It was the subject I was always meant to teach. And then from there, I was like, you kind of have to go through your own process of unlocking what lights you up to be able to coach other students. And I guess one piece that I unlocked is I always loved teaching and I always loved education, but I also loved business growing up. And I was quite entrepreneurial as a kid. Not that I knew it was that at the time, but would also, like, alongside playing schools, would actually go on my mum's like eBay account and sell stuff, or come up with new business ventures with my neighbor. So I actually didn't quite tap into my fullest expression of myself by just teaching. I needed to connect to that business side too. And so what I did from there was actually weave those together, co-founded an education business that took the concept of life design in schools, or self-discovery in schools, and took that to other schools within mostly New South Wales. We did scratch the surface a little bit with Queensland, and yeah, absolutely loved doing that. Loved sort of looking at how do I scale this program We did one-term programs and we did workshops. And this is probably the most synchronistic piece of all. I, whilst doing that business, was just on LinkedIn one day, and my business partner at the time is a big Parramatta Eels fan. So I actually wasn't following the Eels on any form of social media or LinkedIn, but he had liked a post that the Eels made around a scholarship opportunity for rising women in Western Sydney with the Eels in the city of Parramatta. And I just made the age cut off for it because it was like 18 to 28-year-olds, and I was like 28 at the time. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to throw my hat in the ring for this. And so I pitched delivering some of these My Design workshops free of charge for schools within the Parramatta LGA, got that scholarship with the club, and just loved this environment, loved being in it. And I was like, how do I secure some work here? And then little did I know that they were actually thinking about an education venture. And the CEO approached me in and around that scholarship time, and we had some conversations, and yeah, 12 months later, here I am running it. So wild.
Wild. I love every time we have these conversations, there's this feeling of serendipity kind of come, particularly when we talk about how you kind of got to where you want to be. And I feel that there's this real planned happenstance for all the careers people in the room. Is it real, like being open to opportunities, knowing yourself and your strengths, and then being able to kind of navigate using that and jumping at things when they come up.
Totally.
And it's funny that you say about English and health, because I often think that they're the two that are probably the best placed for careers, because English is how we communicate, and careers is really, it's very important that we communicate, and health and our well-being is so intrinsically tied into our careers that I would put those two together. So
yeah, potentially. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Okay. We know about how you got to where you are, which is amazing. And you're now the education program manager for the Parramatta Eels. Now, that's a role, and I know that you sort of touched on it a little bit, but that's a role that most of us aren't familiar with and don't necessarily understand. Would you be able to explain your role a little bit, the kind of things you're doing and how it actually all works?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Eels Institute is now the education arm to the Parramatta Eels. And so I guess if I put it back into school terms, and someone's reflected this back to me here, it's like you're kind of like the principal of the Eels Institute. And I was like, I like it. So that would be the way that I kind of put it in school terms. And so at the moment, with the Eels Institute, we offered two like core dual diploma programs in partnership with TAFE. And they're essentially programs for students that have finished school, that love sport, which is very common in Western Sydney, and want to design a career in the industry. So I guess I have the privilege of overseeing that. And whilst TAFE do deliver the formal qualifications, I get to work with them because they're all doing their classes on site here at the Parramatta Eels. And I work with the TAFE educators to kind of help them contextualize the learning. So if they're learning, like, for example, about project management, rather than learning about like a hypothetical project, actually, no, let's simulate what it's like to plan the club going to Vegas, which is actually what's happening as part of the Vegas initiative. So it could be to that scale. But then I also bring in guest speakers from the club. So students are not only hearing a lot of different people's career journeys, but also getting some real life insight into leadership within an elite sporting organization, within like partnerships or sponsorship, how that works, community, marketing, content, all of that. So they're getting that guest speaker layer, but then they also then do 100 hours of practical work experience with the club. And that's a big portfolio that I oversee, and making sure that that's done in a really meaningful way.
It's a really interesting kind of blend of roles there, because I know you said, you feel like you're the principal of the education arm, but then also really stepping up and taking on that role of connecting what's happening in the classroom with what's happening in your real world. And because it's in the same space, it's so integrated. It's really brilliant. Could you talk a little bit for a minute about your partnership with TAFE? Because while there will be lots of schools and lots of educators who do some work with TAFE, I know your particular model is quite interesting. So yeah, if you could talk us about that collaboration, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's a good one to flesh out, because whilst we are based in Sydney, or Kellyville specifically, we partner with TAFE Queensland. And so often people are like, why is that the case? And so TAFE Queensland have a sub branch called the Academy of Sport. And that's where all of their partnerships with elite sporting organizations are kind of housed. And they're really innovative in how they navigate that. So I guess when the Eels were ready to move quickly on this education arm, and I mean quickly, because it was like launched and our first cohort was starting within 3 months. So it was tight. So we needed an education partner that had, I guess, the blueprint for that side of it. So then we could focus on the blueprint for our side of it, because it's the best way I can kind of describe the Eels Institute from my perspective is it's like its own startup within an already very fast-paced, intense environment. So when we've got that partnership with someone like TAFE Queensland who can do the education really well, it allows us to then do our part really well. So rather than kind of carry both sides of it. And yeah, they've been unreal to work with. And I'm sure there's a pretty big Queensland audience that follow you and listen along. And yeah, can't recommend them enough.
Yeah, that's so great to hear. And I have heard similar things. And I also love how that TAFE is taking on that really innovative approach. You keep like, I feel like this innovation is this like underlying current of this whole conversation. And
Absolutely. That's right. I'm drawn to innovative ways of doing things, whether it's innovative approaches to secondary school, but now I feel like I'm playing in the space of innovative approaches to post-school education.
could you talk a little bit for a minute about what this means for the students? So will they, like on a practical level, what kind of qualifications will they leave with?
Yeah.
But also kind of where do they go from this and how do they get to in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that it's a bit of an anomaly year because it's the first time that we've launched it. But I would say a lot of our January intakes are going to be students who have finished school in the year prior, students that love sport and are looking for their next best step in that direction. So that's where I would say a good portion of our audience is. We've also got quite a few mature age students in this cohort, and they are absolutely thriving because they come with that added level of maturity as well. And they're people, again, they may have done other work in sport and they kind of want the more practical, tangible exposure. And that's why they come here, or they're coming from completely different industries and they're wanting to pivot into sport. So I would say they're kind of our two main audiences: school leavers that love sport and want a next best step in that in that direction, or people that want to sort of pivot into the sports industry. In terms of what they get out of it, so it's all 12-month programs. And so they're dual diplomas. So students will finish with either a dual diploma in sport coaching and leadership and management, or sport coaching and project management. And so I guess if I put my educator career development hat back on, what I love about the leadership and management and the project management skill set is that they're both skills that are very much needed within the sporting industry, but they're transferable skills across other industries as well. So I guess for students engaging in this 1-year program, it's a really great opportunity for them to see if this is the industry for them. And if it is, great. They've got practical experience up their sleeve, they've got networks up their sleeve, and they've got the qualifications. But if they come to the end of this 12 months and realize actually sport's a bit intense for me, which it is, then they have still developed very transferable skills to take into other industries as well.
Yeah, which is really important. And my next question is around that ecosystem approach, because obviously there are benefits for the participants or for the students in this program, but there will be, I can imagine there will be benefits for the Eels as well. Would you be able to talk for a minute about, from the club's perspective, what why did they set this up and what are they hoping to get out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if I guess, borrow some of the explanation of our CEO, Jim Sargentinos, and how he speaks to it, it really adds a whole other dimension to the club. Because not only like the club are very considered, when you think about footy and how they look at their footy programs, they're a development club. They're really invested in developing young talent within our catchment and trying to get as many young people within our area into first grade. So that's sort of on the field trajectory. And so I guess they're taking that same approach for like development pathways, but for off the field careers as well. So that sort of community positive social impact piece is they're really a development club for on the field talent, but they want to be a development club for off the field talent as well. The other piece is it certainly is a way to build a pipeline for talent within the club. And I think to it's no surprise how many people love sport and want to work in the industry. One of the biggest challenges of, I guess, people in HR or recruiters when they're looking for assigning roles within sport is they're bombarded with applications if a job is on Seek or Sports People or whatever it might be. And so rather than them having to sort of sift and sort through 300 potential applications, which is typically what they would get, they actually have an opportunity to, I don't want to say sample, that's not probably the right word, but see potential candidates in action to see if they're a good fit. And what I'm also even finding as well is sporting clubs, the sporting industry is very dependent on like internships and volunteers and things like that. And that's also something that a lot of clubs go out to market for. But one thing that the people at the club can use me for is I can sort of vet and determine who is the best person for these internships rather than you kind of having to risk it by making a quick assessment. So yeah, I think there's multiple benefits across the board. So yeah.
Yeah, I really like that approach. And and it's not just the eels, it's not just sport that I feel are becoming much more ecosystem driven. And we're seeing other industries starting to realize maybe actually we do need to train some of our own people and we do need to think about our pipeline development a little bit more. So
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that because I think the part that excites me most about this is like the industry is exciting. Working at somewhere like the Eels is very exciting, but I love this model to post-school education. And I would love to see, I actually think it's the way forward that when you finish school, and you want to pursue a certain industry, that you're studying or you're learning side by side with that industry. I just think the growth that you have in a shorter time frame is significant. Just being in this environment, being exposed to it, like that provides such authentic learning to students that they wouldn't get if they're at a neutral university or TAFE building. So yeah, would love to see more of it.
you do see it as well with like the more mature, almost like the more savvy industries that they're starting to go, how do we bring an RTO in to do some of this work? Or how do we partner with the university to build these skills in-house? I really like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes left, and I wanted to shift the conversation a little bit because you've got such a wealth of experience in this field, but from a very unique perspective. So I wanted to just ask you a couple of questions about your own observations. So I know you've been involved in different spaces. Right now, you're involved in training and developing like a whole new environment from scratch.
Yeah.
What do you look for when you're designing experiences for learners? Like, what are you wanting to incorporate into your programs?
Yeah, good question. I like it. I think in the same way in my early teaching career, I was asking questions around like, why am I teaching certain things? I don't want to teach something to tick a box. I want to teach something because it's actually going to set young people up for success. I think I'm asking those same questions now, even when it comes to work experience. It's like, cool, okay, it's no secret that a lot of clubs are starting to play in this education space, and a lot of them will offer work experience for the students, or there'll be programs that offer. But I'm like, how many clubs are sitting there and just ticking the box with these experiences and being like, oh, yep, cool, we've done it, versus I'm sitting there thinking like, no, actually, we can't just give students tick a box experiences. We need to give them experiences that are actually going to propel them in their career, because at the end of the day, they're here because they want to be able to move forward in the direction they want to pursue. The experiences that we provide them with actually need to progress them towards it, not tick a box. So I think probably the through line for me is, what's the purpose of what we're doing? Is it actually setting young people up for success, or are we just ticking a box? And I'm not a box ticker at all. Never have been, never will be. So yeah, I think it's making sure that it's purposeful and meaningful.
Okay, I like that. If you were, I mean, you are obviously very talented at this and you have a lot of experience in this. So for you, understanding what makes something purposeful and what makes it, or what would make it not purposeful, is probably almost sort of second nature. Like you probably don't think about it too much. If you were somebody who was a bit newer to this, what would you sort of look for? Like what kind of, have you got any tips?
Let me think. I think it's just building a bit of structure around it. And I think in the first term of the Eels Institute, the way that like we were doing the work experience was like very much like when an opportunity came up, whether it was a home game or an event or ad hoc support for a department, I would throw it out to the students. And I think like part of my reflection at the end of that term was like, it's a bit scattered. Like the work experience is a bit scattered for them. They're just kind of doing all these ad hoc things. And, I had reflections back to me being like, no, the way you're doing work experience is really good. Keep going. Like, that's great. I'm like, I don't think so. I think we could do so much better. And so I think there's a place for the more ad hoc work experience, but actually for something to be meaningful, there needs to be some level of structure and consistency to it. So what I've been really trying to build out is more of these like work placement blocks or internships. So students can actually build a more deeper connection with people at the club, because you don't get that as much through the scattered experience. And then they can actually go a little bit deeper into game day and events, or a bit deeper into partnerships, or whatever it might be. So I would say to someone starting out is, if you're looking at building experiences for students, are they just really scattered and random experiences that are just ticking a box or filling a gap? Or are they a little bit more structured and have got a little bit more depth to them? That's how I would look at it. Are they super broad, or do they have some depth? And upon reflection, like I've got some students who would actually be quite happy with, 50 broad experiences. But I think in terms of setting people up for careers post this, 50 random experiences versus like 2 to 3 structured blocks is probably going to be what makes them more employable. So that's how I see it.
And it's an interesting situation because obviously we're seeing a lot more of a shift towards that broad, shorter duration, kind of like taster type
Yeah.
experiences in work experience. But because what you're doing is embedded within the learning, you can go deeper and build those deeper, better, more richer experiences. So you made me think now. I'm going to go and think about that
Yeah.
later.
Like, I think that there's a place for all of it. So I should probably preface that, because I think if you're someone, and most students are when they start with us, they know that they love sport, but they are very open about their direction. They don't know what actually exists. So there's a place for the more ad hoc,
Yeah.
broad experiences, but it can't just be that. Like, because at the end of the day, that's not going to really that might help them figure out a bit more about their direction, but it's not going to make them more employable. So I guess the way I sort of see it is that first half of their time with us should probably be a bit more broad, so they've got that exploration, but then they should have the opportunity to be able to kind of like specialize or do a little bit more structured experiences in that tail end of it, because that's what's going to make them more employable by the end of it.
No, that makes sense to me. Okay, so all of your roles and everything that you've done, even back when you were teaching your siblings, when they maybe were
Yeah.
a bit reluctant about it, has this real undercurrent of, like, I would call it empowerment.
Mm.
It's that everything you talk about is about how can I lift up students? How can I raise them and help them be the best version of themselves that they want to be?
Mm.
Do you have any thoughts on how that undercurrent of empowerment impacts on your work with young people,
Mm.
both in like the choices of job you're taking and roles
Mm.
you're taking, but also in the experiences that you're designing and the programs you're championing?
Yeah, it's always nice to have that reflection back, because sometimes you're just so in it that you don't even realize what you're doing. I don't know if you've ever, I love a good strengths tool, like we all do. What comes to mind there is like Clifton's strengths. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Clifton's strengths, but two of mine, like one is activator, which is like I like to get things moving and people moving. So I think that's there. And then there's like maximizer, like I don't like good stuff. I don't like things to be good. I like things to be great. So I think if you pair them together, is I like moving people towards their own version of greatness, or moving people towards something that lights them up. So I think that oozes through. I don't think I can switch that part of me off, but I think that then that influences the type of programs I create, because I can look at other education program managers within like even TAFE Queensland's network or more broadly, and a lot of them come from a bit more of a footy sport background, and they bring a different flavor to how they do their role compared to what I do. For me, it's very much around the career development side of it. I think yeah, that's the lens that I'll always bring to it. And I think I would argue, like, at the end of the day, we're providing these students with an education service to help them with designing their careers. So yeah, for me, it's a no-brainer to operate through that lens, and it's just supercharged with my strengths.
No, I love that. And yeah, I can, it's interesting hearing you reflect on your strengths and how then that applies to how I've sort of seen you from the outside as well. So that's really cool. Look, thank you so much for your time today. I've got just one last question. If you could point to one thing in particular that you're finding really exciting about where our field is headed, what would that be?
I think, do you mean like career development? Like, would you say that when you say field?
Career development, but also I think education, because the way you describe your role as an educator is that the purpose of education is to prepare for
Yeah.
what comes next. So it's career development, but it's the bigger picture thing as well.
Yeah. Look, I would definitely say that there's something in this post-school space around like how I can just see it's being redesigned in that, whether it's more models like the Eels Institute or like Sport are doing it well. They are helping people who are wanting to pursue that direction by like having them learn in and around an elite sporting organization. Like, they're changing that model. So I think I would love to see that grow into other industries, like whether that's also in hospitality, whether it's also in construction, marketing, whatever it might be. So I would love to see that type of model expand. I think as well, the initial thing that popped to mind as you asked that question was more around like, with the rise of I believe that it's just going to make our humanness more valuable than ever before. And so our humanness could be taken through the lens of those human-centered skills, communication, emotional intelligence, all of that. But I've always had this like gut feel or this intuitive feeling that it's actually when we're like really lit up about something, whether we're really lit up about sport or beauty or whatever it is, it's like AI could never actually replicate the feeling of a human being so lit up. So I think what's very exciting about both education and career development is we get to either help people figure out what's the thing that gives them that spark, and then education's kind of like their next best step for activating that spark.
I love that. And I agree totally. That human skills are going to be, yeah, the thing. And there's so much that AI can't. It can do a lot, but there's so much that it can't do. So
Yeah. So it's like, how do we dial up the human side of us? And that is those human-centered skills, but it's also like really tuning into those areas that light us up, because it's that energy. Like, if you're creating from that energy or you're doing something from that energy, that'll be something that AI will never be able to replicate. So yeah.
I think that's a fantastic spot to finish this Ponderers session today. Thank you so much for coming along and for sharing all your wisdom. I feel like I've learned a lot. I'm going to go off and write some things down now.
Love it.
All
Love
right.
it. No,
Really
thank you so
grateful.
much for having me.